Beginning the Daf the Shabbos Daf Kofei, begin on the second line down at the top of the Amud. The Gemara continues explaining the halacha of a previous Mishnah, which is concluding this parak of Baina, which we were speaking about the halacha of Akaisa regarding writing on Shabbos. It just corresponds to Bekazik and Cheskel, Torah Anytime, Daf Achayim. Thank you everyone who's joining us today. So what we're going to speak about today's Daf is nutrikin, that of an acronym, writing one letter and then making like an apostrophe, making some sign that it stands for a whole word, if one is chayav for writing with that or not. The minhag shiur, our next parak is going to begin with the minhag shiur necessary to violate several malachas, such as weaving, sewing, whitening, dyeing, spinning. Additionally, we're going to speak about someone who tears, although one of the lamatas malachas is tearing. What happens if he tears out of anger? Is that also considered the malacha, or that would be considered mekalkal? How to properly react to the death of a righteous person. Some ideas and concepts we're going to speak about today's daf is what's called ein yediyah l'chatzi shiur. Generally, a yediyah contains and ends a malacha. Then you forget it's a new achatas. However, there's a machlekes regarding chatzi shiur. If let's say the shiur is two letters, and after the first letter, oh, I made a mistake, and then again you forget if that's considered yediyah or not to separate the two halves. Additionally, the concept that we speak about many times, what's called malacha shin tzir l'gufa, is machlekes tanoim. If let's say you're digging a pit, but you're not doing it for the pit, you just want the earth, that's an unintended for the thing itself, if that's considered a malacha or not. And finally, mekalkal, that although generally a malacha, when you do it, you're chayav, but if done in a destructive manner, we know many things in Shabbos we do is permitted because of mekalkal. Opening up a bag of chips, or opening whatever, all these things, because it's mekalkal, you're not violating the malacha, and therefore it's going to be pati. Beginning our Daf Kofei Manal, second line down from the top of the Yomim. The Mishnah said, "Kasav Isachas Nutrikin." If you write one letter that's a nutrikin, which is an acronym, for every machlekes, Shuvim say Mechayv says Yechayv. Chum Peichim, Chum say you're going to be exempt. And essentially, the concept that it comes down to is, on the one hand, it's a word. On the other hand, you didn't write the two letters. That's the machlekes. Now, once we introduce that, so the Gemara has a discussion. Amar B'Yechad Mishum Rabbeisa ben Zimra. It says, "Menayim l'lashon nutrikim min haTorah." Where do you find this expression of abbreviation from the Torah? Where do you find such a concept? So the Gemara brings a few different sources. First, Rabbi Yechon says in the name of Rabbi ben Zimra, it says, it's a pasuk in Bereshit says, Ki Av, because the father of Hamoin Goyim, of the multitudes of nations in the Saticha I placed you. Abraham Avinu was told by Hashem, your name is Avraham now. Av Hamoin, the father of the multitudes. So what is Av Hamoin that's referring to? As Mefarshim explained, that the writing it like this is is coming to tell you something, because it doesn't really say Avraham, it's Av Hamoin. So each letter is actually alluding to another characteristic that Avraham Avinu was being told by Hashem. The Aleph is Av Nisatich Lumas, I make you into a father to the nations. The Beis is to Bachar Nisatich Lumas, I make you the chosen one amongst the nations. Then the word Hamoin, we know Hey and Ches is interchangeable. Hamoin stands for Chaviv Nisatich Lumas, I made you beloved amongst the nations. The mem is Melech Nesatich Lumas, I made you a king amongst the nations. Like Rashi means the pasuk, Nesili Kimata. Avraham Avinu was considered the king, the prince of all the nations. The Vav is Vasik Nesatich Ba'umis, I made you distinguished amongst the nations. And the Nun is Nema Nesatich Lumas, I made you trusted amongst the nations. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Didei Rabbi Yochanan, this previous interpretation was Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Rabbi ben Zimra. And Rabbi Yochanan Didei, he brings his own source to show the trick in the Torah. Says it's the famous Onoichi. Hashem says Onoichi Hashem Lekecha. Hashem Tzesicha, that the first thing Hashem told us by Har Sinai was Onoichi. So the word Onoichi, as Rashi explains, but the fact that it doesn't say Ani, there's two ways to say me. There's Ani or Onoichi, and the fact that it says the longer one, which is Onoichi, is actually coming to allude to a Netrikin. The Netrikin acronym is Ano Nafshi. Me myself, says Hashem, Kesivis Yehovis. I wrote it and I gave it. Which means to say Hashem's soul, so to speak, was given to us in the Torah. Anoichi is saying, alluding to the fact that Hashem says, I gave myself in the writing of the Torah. Rabban Amri, they say a different interpretation. It's Amira Ne'ima, a pleasant statement. Kesiva was written, Yehiva was given. That's the acronym of Anoichi, that's referring to the Torah. Igidami, those who say that Anoichi, you could read Lamafreya backwards. You start from the Yud, going back to the Aleph. Yehiva, Kesiva, it was given in writing, Nemonim Amareha, how its words are reliable. Now, the Gemara brings another interpretation. They bring a different source from the pasuk where the Malach was talking to Bilam, when Bilam was hitting the donkey. Ki Yorad Haderech Lenegdi, because it hastened the path opposite me. which in the simple translation of the pasuk it's talking about Bilam, but the way the Gemara, or the Be'er Nosson expounds it, is actually going on the donkey. Why was Yared Haderech, why was the donkey going and pushing his foot against the wall? Is because Yara, she was afraid, Rasa, because she saw what she saw, the angel, and Natsa, so she veered from the path. That's why, because it was afraid of the Malach. That's alluded to in the word Yara. Another source, the Rabbi Shmuel Tana, it's a pasuk that says, by the Minchas Ha'omer, the second day of Pesach, which when we start Sfiras Ha'omer, there was a barley offering that they would bring, what's called Geras Carmel. So Carmel literally means say plum kernels, but the word Carmel is an acronym. It stands for Kar Mole, a full pillow, which is because you bring the Minchas Ha'omer when it's still moist, when the grain inside is still full, and so the Kar, meaning the straw that the grain is inside, is like the pillow, is full with it. It's very plump. And therefore, that's what Carmel, Kar is a pillow, Mole that's full. That's an acronym. Another source the Gemara brings Rav Achim Yaakov, he brings a pasuk in Melachim Aleph, which is David, when he's talking about Shimi ben Gera, Amar, so Rabbi Achim Yaakov says, the David HaMelech said about him, V'hu kilnalni kolola nimretzes. Simple translation is that David was saying how Shimi ben Gera cursed me, an explicit curse. But the word nimretzes is in the Trikin, it's an acronym regarding what Shimi said regarding David. This is what Shimi cursed David. He said all these bad things about David. He said that Noyev, who is an adulterer, Moavi, who is from Moav, which David HaMelech was a descendant from Rus, who is from Moav, Ritzeach, who is a murderer, Tzaruhu, he's an enemy, Toyebu, who is an abomination. So these are all the things, Nimretzes, the curse was Nimretzes. These are the things that Shimi said about David. A final source of Nachman Yitzchak, he brings a different nutrikin, that of what the Shvatim said when they were caught, that they had the becher, they had the cup, or the goblet of Yosef. They said, Manadaba, what can we say, Uman Tzaddik, and how can we go ahead and justify ourselves? So Nitzaddik is an acronym. It's Nechayim Anachnu, we're upright, Tzaddikim Anachnu, we're righteous, Ta'ir Anachnu, we're pure, Dachim Anachnu, we're clean, Kadeshim Anachnu, we're holy. Nitzaddik is, the Miram is alluding to, is in the Trikin, for all these different things that they were trying to justify themselves. Final mission in this parak, it concludes on the theme of the previous Mishnah. It's regarding Hakaisev Beis. Someone writes 2 letters. So we said that's the minimum shiur for the Malach of Kaisev. Now, but let's say it was done b'shtei halamas, 2 laps of awarenesses. Meaning, Acha Shachar v'Achas ben Abayim. You wrote 1 letter in the morning, and you wrote it 1 later in the evening. Now, Rashi explains why we're saying 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Since there was such a large gap in between, the amount of time that you could become aware, it's like as if it's 2 halamas, which Taisus disagrees. And Taisus says that, no, then it should have said the amount of time. And additionally, we know that someone asked actually yesterday after the shir, if you had 1 ois in Sipori and 1 ois in Tiberia, you said you need chayiv, even though obviously it would be a large gap of time. So that says Taisus, no, it's talking about that you do, that there was an actual yediyah. So why we're saying 1 was done in the morning, 1 was in the evening, is that even though with the yediyah there was a hefsek and a large amount of time, we're coming to say that still, Rabbi Gamliel Mechayiv, Rabbi Gamliel still says you're going to be chayiv. So that's just adding to that chiddush of him, but Chacham and Paichim is going to be, in all circumstances, they're going to hold that it's, even if it wasn't 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. That's not really the significant part according to Taisus. The main idea essentially is that if you wrote 1 letter, and you chapped oivei, and wrote a letter, and then 10 minutes later, or 7 minutes later, or 7 hours later, you forgot and you wrote a 2nd letter. So we have machlekes, if that's considered a yediyah or not. As the Gemara says, what's their machlekes? Says the Gemara, Milil holds ein yediyah l'chatzi shir. For a half of a measurement of a malacha, which 1 letter is a half of a measurement. The malacha of Shabbos, the chiyuv deraisa, is only when you write 2 letters. If after 1 letter you have quoted yediyah, that's not considered a significant yediyah. Now, Taisa says why? Taisa brings because the pasuk says oy hoida lav chatasa, if he becomes aware of his sin, meaning the yediyah has to be of your chatas. That's called the yediyah. But if you have a yediyah not of a chatas, because becoming aware of 1 letter is not a chatas yet, so that's not considered yediyah. Oy hoida lav chatasa has to be in the awareness of the chatas. Becoming aware of a letter is not the halacha of becoming aware. So therefore, he holds that there's no yediyah l'chatzi shir, but Rabban Sabbath, they hold that yes, the yediyah l'chatzi shir, there is an awareness for the half of the measurement, which separates the 2, so they don't combine anymore. So you have the liability of 1 letter and then another letter, but liability of 1 letter is not a liability of chatas, and therefore they hold that you're going to be patur. Hanva Chabayna shall return to the 12th parak of Masechet Shabbos Perek Habayim, which spoke about Malacha Habayim and Kais of the different malachas. And with that we begin the 13th parak, which actually now this is the halfway point in Perakim of Masechet Shabbos, because there are 24 Perakim, of Perek Ha'orik, which continues to explain the different malachas. Specifically here we start off with the malacha of Orik, of weaving, which we already spoke about in the Fine Gimel and Alf. We spoke about all the malachas, where we said that the malacha of Orik is that of 2 threads. Here we have machlekes actually to qualify what is the measurement of the malacha of Orik. So Rabbi Shloimy, he says, Ha'orik shleisha chutin b'tchila. Someone weaves, if it's in the beginning, meaning if this is, he's just starting, if you see the picture, he had the warp, like the warp threads, which are going through the heddle rings. Now, the weaving process is taking the weft thread and moving it through. So this is thread number 1, thread number 2, thread number 3. So Eliezer says, to be chayiv in the beginning, you have to do 3 threads. Less than that, if let's say you did only 2, wouldn't be significant for the malacha. Now, but let's say you already had 3 threads already done. And now, on Shabbos, you're coming to add on to what was already woven beforehand. That's va'achas ala arik. If you're doing even just 1, interesting, right? In the beginning, you can't be chayav unless you have 3. But that's because to start it off, he holds 2 is not significant. But if you already have, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and now you're just adding on, so actually chayav will be chayav just adding on 1 more because it's already significant. You're just coming to add on, and therefore you'll be chayav. Now, that's a contrary to Eliezer. They say no, they don't differentiate if it's just starting or if it's already was before. Shiur basically, the measurement's always 2 threads. So they'll hold that this would be chayiv, and they'll hold even if you had like 7 already done, on Shabbos it's not enough you do 1, you have to do 2. It's always going to be 2 according to Chum. According to Eliezer, either 3 or 1. According to the Chum, it's always going to be 2 threads. Next malacha, someone makes 2 heddle eyes, or as they call 2 heddle rings, which is that he puts, this actual machlekes you're showing exactly, is it the actual making of the heddle rings, which this is the frame, and this is how you weave, because we said that you have to have the warp threads, and then you have to be able to pick it up, put it down, the even and the odd ones, and you go in and out. So one of the ways of doing that is keeping them in heddle rings. So as machlekes you're showing, the way Rashi says it is that it's the putting the warp thread in the heddle ring. If you do that with 2 of the threads, that's the malacha of Oiseh Shtei Batei Nirin. Now, there's many different ways of having heddle rings, as the Mishnah explained. You could have it benirin in the heddles. What is the heddle? So the heddle actually is this string, or whatever it's made out of, coming down over here. These vertical lines are the heddles. Then in the heddles are heddle rings. So putting the threads through the heddle rings in, let's say, the heddles, or bekirus, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly what is kirus, or benafo in the fine sieve, or bekfara in the coarse sieve, or besalo in the basket, which as Rashi explains, why we're mentioning all these different, they're all in heddle rings, is because they're not really heddles. They're actually, you would twist 1 thread of the weft thread in the warp thread on the bottom, and 1 on the top, and that's how you would keep the vertical threads. In other words, as we'll describe, I'll show a picture shortly, but basically it's not done in the regular way as we have all these pictures of the weaving looms. It's done in a different way when you're doing a sieve or a basket. So therefore the Mishnah is mentioning, whichever one it is. If there's a heddle ring here that you made that essentially keeps the warp thread straight so that you could start the weaving process, that would be violating your Oiseh Shtei Batei Nirin. You'd be chayav. Next malacha that the Mishnah discusses is about teifa-based spheres. If someone sews 2 stitches, that's the malacha of teifa. If someone tears a garment with the intention of making 2 stitches, so then it's going to be chayav. Now the Gemara explains regarding the opening halacha of our Mishnah, this machlekes Reb Eliezer and the Chachamim, about how much is considered the malacha of weaving, how many threads you have to do. So the Gemara says, Ki asher Reb Yitzchak, when Reb Yitzchak came to Bavel, so Tani, he taught our Mishnah that Reb Eliezer had said that weaving was shtay, with, in the beginning, not 3 threads, but 2 threads, and therefore that's not disagreeing with the Chum who always said it's 2. Machlekes Reb Eliezer and Rabbanan was only regarding when you already had a woven amount. That is what he was disagreeing regarding this halacha. If that's going to be 1 or 2, but Reb Yitzchak's version didn't have this machlekes regarding what's the beginning. The beginning is going to be 2, like the way the Chacham say. That says the Gemara, but how could he say that? But it's not Gimel. In our Mishnah we learned that Reb Eliezer says the beginning has to be 3 threads, not 2. How could he teach the Mishnah of 2 threads? Says the Molek Kash not difficulty. They're talking about two different cases, so they both could be true. How so? Habalini, one's talking about thick thread. Habiktini, one's talking about thin thread. Now, actually, interestingly, the Gemara brings that Amri Lo Lahai Gisa. Some say the answer is one way. Amri Lo Lahai Gisa, some say it's the other way. I mean, we're giving an answer and differentiating between thick and thin, but actually it's going to be opposite interpretations. Amri Lo Lahai Gisa, some say it's this way, meaning Alimi, when it's thick thread, that's actually when you need to have 3 and not 2. Why? Because Tlasa Lo Sasri. When you have 3 threads, it's not going to unravel. Trei Sasri, when the 2 threads is going to come undone. Why? Because since they're very thick, so they don't stick so quickly. You know, when you have the thick shoelaces, sometimes they get undone, the thin ones sometimes, so it's going to get undone. So therefore, that's actually when you need to have 3. But Ketini, when they're the thin threads, actually with 2 you're going to be chayav because Trei Nami Lo Sasri. When it's thin threads, even when they're 2, they're not going to come undone. So that's one interpretation. So some say it's the opposite, that actually the thick threads is going to be chayav with 2. Because Ketini, when it's thin, it's only noticeable. So it's coming from a different concept. It's only noticeable when there's 3 threads. Trei Lidi, 2 threads you don't really see. It's so thin, therefore you're not going to be chayav. Alimi, when they're thick, Trei Nami Yadi, even 2 you notice it, it's noticeable, and therefore you're going to be chayav. But again, by thin ones, by 2 you're going to be pater. So we resolve the contradiction in the same answer, but 2 opposite ways. That there's difference between thick and thin, but that's a machlekes in the Gemara if that's going to be on which way is going to be the one that's 2 and which one is going to be that's going to be 3. Now, continuing on the halacha related to the halacha, the Mishnah, Tanya Limna Brisa. It's essentially going to quote 2 different brises that are going to be the Tanakama, either like Rabbi Eliezer or like the Chacham. If someone weaves 3 threads in the beginning, or the echad ala arik, or let's say he already had a woven thwath and he's just adding on one more thread, so chayav is going to be chayav. Chachamim and the sages say no, bein mitchila bein mesef. Whether in the beginning or in the end, shiur on beis chut. The measurement is always 2 threads. Now, another thing we didn't mention yet, says the Brisa, uvasafa. There are those who weave at the end of a garment an edge, stitching, what we call it, on the length of along the entire length of the garment, a different type of the warp thread, and its width is along the width of the garment, a measurement of what's called shloisha bati nirin. However much it is as a bati nir, that's the width of 3 of those. So therefore, says the Brisa, if someone weaves beis chut 2 threads of weft thread of ori, bereichiv gimel bati nirin, in the width of 3 bati nirin, he's going to be chayav, because that's the norm that people do, that they make a stitching at the end of the garment. So therefore, when you do that, even if it's just a width of 3 bati nirin, you're going to be chayav. Now, says the Brisa, what's this compared to? In other words, why you chayav for weaving such a small amount? And we don't say, as we're going to say on Amud Beis in the Mishnah, that the shiur of weaving is kamalei reichav hasit, is the width of from one finger to another finger, as it is when you're doing in the middle of the garment. Why over here you chayav for such a small amount when you're doing the stitching at the end of the garment? Says the Brisa, it's compared it's compared to someone who's weaving a small belt. Now, a small belt is not wider than 3 bati nirin. And when you're doing that, when you're weaving beis chut in 2 threads, the width of 3 bati nirin, is considered significant because that's how the small belt usually is. So since there's a chashivas, even a small amount, by stitching is the same thing. Although normally weaving is not so significant, but stitching is something that would be significant even by a small amount, living mechayiv in that smaller measure. Now, parenthetically, the Gemara just comments and says this is the Brisa is to open up the Tanakama, the unanimous Tana. That if you're weaving 3 threads either in the beginning, or meaning you're just starting off, so then it's going to be only if you do 3 threads. Or the echad ala arik, or if when you already had a woven amount and you're doing just one, says the Gemara, stomach Rebbe Eliezer. It's telling you an anonymous Brisa, the Tanakama, the anonymous Tana is like that of Rebbe Eliezer. That's one Brisa. Tanya Yidich another Brisa, saying basically similar ideas, and it's just going to tell us here the Stam Tana is actually the other opinion of our Mishnah. Learn another Brisa, Orig Beis Chutin, if someone weaves 2 threads. So if it's alagas, if it's on a large piece which was already woven, or vala imra, or on the border, this is different than the stitching at the end. This is actually the beginning of the garment. Where when you're doing on the border, you would first weave weft thread from a different type for the border. So chayiv, you can be chayiv if you're doing 2 threads. As we'll see, that's obviously like the chacham. It doesn't make a difference if it's at the beginning or it's in the middle. Rabbi Eliezer, I mean, he says, no, afila echad, as we said in the Mishnah, he holds that when you already had a large swath already, a large piece, if you do even one thread, you're going to be chayv. Now, ubesafa, by the edge, which we said that's the end of the garment, that's along the entire warp, you make a thread. So then, shnei chutin b'reichiv shleisha batinir, like we had in the previous brisa, this saying the same idea, that if you do 2 threads along the width of 3 batinir, chayv, you're going to be chayv. Says the brisa again, what does this compare to? To weaving a small little belt. Shnei chutin al reichiv gimel batinir, that if you do 2 threads on the width of 3 batinir, again, which that's a certain measurement, then you're going to be chayv. And here also says the Gemara, parenthetically, this that the brisa starts off and says that the measurement of 2 threads is whether it's on a large piece that you already had woven before, or it's the beginning of it, that you can be chayv the 2 threads. Says the Gemara, stomach rabban, that's just telling us anonymous brisa, like the Rabban. Again, we just had 2 brises that basically said the same ideas, and it just introduced something about the stitching at the end and starting off the garment, and just one brisa was stomach Rabbi Eliezer, one was stomach rabbanan, which were the 2 different opinions in our Mishnah regarding if the liability is going to be starting off with 3 and at the end if even 1, or it's always going to be 2, which is like the opinion of the Chacham. Now, we said in the Mishnah, ha'isa beis batei nirin. If someone makes 2 batei nirin, which are these 2 heddle rings, so then he's going to be chayiv if it's banirayin, or we had some other terms. So first says the Gemara, my banirin, which some Gemaras here have on the side, that it says, what's the shtei nirin? What's these two nirin? So actually, the Gemara really could give a very simple answer, which and could be that is what the Gemara is saying, which is it's basically making these 2 heddle rings. That's what oisa shtei batei nirin, or like the way Rashi says, putting the 2 threads through the 2 heddle rings. But on Abaya says like this, and we'll do it the way Rashi translates, which is actually a little bit complicated. And actually in our video that we put out recently on the Lamites Malachas, it has that picture which I'm going to show now. Abaya says, it's tarti, it's 2 times around the warp thread, bebate niri, for the heddle rings. So what this is actually talking about, couldn't get it onto the slides for some reason, but it's this picture that the way Rashi is described, and this is actually from our new video, that it's 2 times looping the thread of the warp thread on the batei nirin, and it's b'chad b'nirin, and 1 on the heddle rope. So you're wrapping the 3rd time around the rope, which is around the rod. Essentially what this picture is describing is that there's different ways how to make, it's essentially the same thing, but it's just describing it as, here what you would do is, it's not such a clear picture, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but the idea of it is that you're pulling it back, you have like, these are the even or the odd ones, let's say this is 1 and 3 and so on and so forth, and you would have it on a stick, and that would pull it back so that you could just pull through. That is what Rashi is trying to describe over here. Check out our video for more understanding, but basically it's a way of making 2 of these, is making 2 of the batei nirin, which is essentially 2 of the threads. It's just a different way wrapping it around, and how they used to do it with a stick and pulling it out so that you could just put the spool through it, so you don't have to go each one individually, you just throw it all through and you'll be going through all the even or the odd numbers. That's what Rashi is describing over here in this picture. But again, that's the malacha of oisa shtei batei nirin, which the simple understanding really is just to look at it like this. Is when you put 2 of the warp threads through, that's doing beis batei nirin, that's a malacha of the Lamites Malachas. Now, one of the cases was bekeirus. We said if you're putting the 2 heddle rings either through the heddles, which are these vertical threads, or bekeirus. Says the Gemara, my bekeirus, what's bekeirus? How are you doing 2 heddle rings that way? So Marab, it's matsuvisa. It's the heddle frame, which is actually like this picture over here, which is by the when the weavers would make their curtains, so they would weave with their foot, which is the pedals. You see those pictures where they have the pedals picking up the even or the odd, which that takes the place of the rod, which was the picture we just showed before, which was more primitive, which would pick it up and down in the curtains of the women. So this heddle frame is this exactly over here, which is that picks it up, picks it down. You have 1 frame here, 1 frame here, 1 for the even, 1 for the odd, as we've had pictures in the past, and 1 picks up, 1 puts down. That's what we mean by keywords. It's just another way of having a case of heddle rings. Just one is going to be with a frame, and one's going to be just with the heddles coming down. Now the Mishnah then said about tefer base tviras. Someone makes 2 stitches, he's going to be chayav. Says the Gemara, why are you telling me this? Hatanina b'avos malachas. We're not going through every Lamed Tes Malachas over here in these Mishnayos. We already said in the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Gimel on Perek Klal Gadol, we said Vateva Beis Tfiris, so someone makes 2 stitches. As Rashi explains, why are we repeating over here? You're not coming to explain anything different than you said there already. In other words, we understand why we opened up with Oirig, with weaving, because we wanted to mention the machlekes regarding how much is the shear. We also spoke about Shtei Batei Nirin to tell you that the Shtei Batei Nirin, the 2 heddle rings will be whether it's in heddles or in the frame or in a basket or a sieve, which that doesn't say over there to get that you can get 2 heddle rings like that too. But here regarding stitching, what are you adding on more that you didn't say in the Mishnah over there? Says Gemara, you're right. We're not really telling you anything regarding stitching. It's mishum dikaboy lemisna seif. It's only because we wanted to tell you the seif of that. Because what do we tell you after sewing? We told you about karei on the slit for base tefir. So someone tears with the intention of stitching. So then you can be chayiv 2 with the intention of stitching 2 stitches. So karei is related to teifer. So we said teifer because we want to tell you karei. Says Gemara, I understand. What do you mean? That also says the Gemara. Katani nami so that's what katani nami teifer. That's why he said also stitching. Says Gemara, but why are you saying stitching for tearing? Tearing was also mentioned over there in the Mishnah and Perek Klal Gadol. Says Gemara, we wanted to say the seifa of our Mishnah, which is the coming Mishnah on the days, which the Mishnah describes Hakareya b'chamosa. If someone tears with his anger, or because of a dead person, that halacha we're going to see is a machlekes. So because of that, we want to mention sewing 2 stitches, so we can tell you kareya. We're telling kareya, so we can tell you kareya b'chamasei. That's what we said, but you're right, not really teaching anything regarding that we didn't know about teifer and kareya. Now the Mishnah said about kareya manas lit for shtei tfiros. If you're tearing with the intention of then re-sewing it for 2 stitches, then you're going to be chayiv for tearing, because it has to be amanas l'sakin. Says the Gemara, heichem mishkav. So where do you ever find that you have to tear to then go ahead while you're tearing, just keep it? Why are you tearing to stitch 2 stitches? Base says the Gemara, yes, it's because the avda, it says that the garment is made kikista like a pocket, meaning it's folded over and the garment is not even and it's sticking out like a pocket in the garment. So you have to tear the garment on the bottom to stitch it over there and make it smooth. That's where you're going to be tearing it to stitching it. That would be the malacha deraisa of karei to b'chai b'chatas on Shabbos. Now we continue as we mentioned with the next Mishnah, which is actually what we brought in the previous Mishnah, which is called the Reisha of our Mishnah, Teifer, because we wanted to tell Kaifer, Kaireya. But we already know that from Klal Gadol. We said, it's for this Mishnah. Because Hakareya b'chamasei, if someone tears out of anger, just tears up the garment. Or Valmesa, because of a dead person who passed away, he's doing Kriya. V'chal mekalkalin, or any type of destructive act. Peturin, you're actually going to be exempt. And that's different than what we said. We said, you're chayiv for malacha deraisa b'karei. Here you're going to be exempt because it's a makalkal. So too says the Mishnah, but let's say it's v'hamakalkal manas l'sakin. Let's say it's a tearing, it's a destructive act with the intention of repairing it. Then it is considered, like we said in the Reisha, the malacha deraisa. And then shiur k'misakin. What's the measurement for how much you have to tear? Is the amount of how much it is to be misakin. Like we said by kirei, it's two stitches, which is what fixes it. That's how much you chayiv for the destructive act if the intention is that it's to go ahead and repair it. Now, says the Mishnah, shir hamalabin, the measurement of whitening, which is the malacha deraisa of malabin, or the hamanabitz of a disentangling, which is another malacha of Shabbos, vatzeveya, or of dyeing, which is coloring the garment, which also, these are all av malachas, vatayba, or someone who spins the thread. It's kamalei roichav hasit kafel. It's the width of a double of the sit. What's the sit? So the Gemara actually explains that sit is the distance between the middle finger and the ring finger. However far you could make that distance, that's the distance of sit.
The pointer finger.
The pointer finger. Yeah. And all right, this is the ring finger. Yeah. See, I don't wear rings, so it's just maybe one. So yeah. So these are the pointer finger and the middle finger. And if you spin or you whiten or you disentangle or you dye, which are all av malachas, one thread. This measurement, now that's how much is the sit, but actually for these things it's sit hakafel. So double this amount is the measurement of these malachas. Now, for oirik shnei chutin, however, regarding weaving, it's actually more stringent. If someone weaves 2 threads, shiuri, its measurement along the width of the garment is kamalei hasit. Is even if he didn't weave along the entire length of the width of the garment, only that of 1 sit, not double. By weaving, it's just a distance one time between the pointer finger and the middle finger, is going to be chayv and malacha bar. So that's the shiurim that we didn't mention In that Mishnah, we're mentioning that over here. But first the Gemara says, wait, you told me that if you tear out of anger or on the mess, then you're going to be potter. Above Ramina, it seems to be contradicted from the following brisa. It says, if someone tears out of anger, or mourning, Val Mesai on his dead who passed away, Chayiv is going to be Chayiv. Now the brisa just ends, says, even though he desecrated the Shabbos, like we said, he's Chayiv for tearing. But Yotzi de Kriya, he was Yotzi, he fulfilled his obligation of tearing, which a person has to, what's called rice Kriya. He has to tear a garment because of a dead person. Although you did Chil Shabbos, but you were Yotzi, that mitzvah of doing Kriya. But one thing is, it's a contradiction. Our Mishnah says you're Potter, and the Brisa says you're going to be Chayiv. Says it's not difficult. Why? The Brisa says that you're going to be Chayiv is talking about the B'meisdi day, by his dead person, meaning someone that he has an obligation to do Kriya. Oh, so that tearing is not Kilkul, that's a Tikkun. Because that's fulfilling his obligation of doing Kriya. Our Mishnah is to a regular dead person, but you don't have an obligation of tearing Kriya. So that's not a Masakin. You're just tearing a garment. That's acting Mekalkal. That's why you're going to be Potter, not Mishnah. Says, well, wait a second. How can you say it in our Mishnah talking about a random guy? But in our Mishnah it says his dead, which sounds like that it's someone he has an obligation to do Kriya on. So why are you going to be Potter? So you're right. It's talking about his dead person. What does it mean, his dead person? Someone that he's obligated to bury. So it's called Meisai. But however, it's talking about someone that he does not have an obligation to have mourning for. He's not one of those that it's in this what's called the 7 close relatives that it says by the Parsha of the Kama, his father, his mother, his son, his daughter, his brother, his sister. It's not one of those 7 close relatives. So therefore, that's why he doesn't have an obligation of Kriya. And if he's tearing, it's not a tikkun, it's a kilkon, therefore he can be potter. The Bryce says he can be chayiv, is one of those 7 close relatives. So that resolves the contradiction if you're going to be chayiv or not. But says the Gemara, wait a second. But v'i chachamu, if the one that passed away is a sage, chiyuv mechayiv, then he's obligated to tear. In other words, and since he's chayiv to tear, so then it would be mesakin, it would be fixing. So then why are you going to be potter? So we're asking, even on the case of the Mishnah, saying it's not one of the 7 relatives, but is he a chacham? If it's a chacham, then you do have an obligation to rice kriya. The time we learn the brisa, chacham shemei, so the sage passed away. Hakol kroiv, if everyone's his relative. Says the Gemara, hakol kroiv is so good. You really think everyone? I know this Jewish geography, but if a sage passed away, everyone's his relative? Oh, he's my uncles, cousins. What does that mean? And then my relative says, you want to know hakol kroiv. Everyone's like his relatives. What does that mean to say? Hakol karn in love. Everyone has to tear his garment on the sage. Hakol choltz in the love. Everyone has to go ahead what's called chalutze kesem, with their shoulders beard, which they have to take off their clothing until the shoulder is uncovered. Hakol mavar in love b'rechava. Everyone gets fed on him in the street, meaning everyone has to eat what's called the sudas havara, that the mourners eat in the street, that first meal that the mourner eats. They don't eat from their own food. It's actually forbidden. As Hashem said to Yecheskel, you're different. You're going to not eat other people's foods, which the inference is that everyone else will eat other people's foods. So you see by a sage that you also have to do kriya. So who cares? It's not one of the 7 relatives. So the Gemara says, right? We're talking about in our Mishnah, he's not a sage. And because he's not a sage, so therefore, again, you don't have an obligation of kriya, and therefore it's going to be mekalkal. Says the Gemara, but if it's an upstanding person, so then you're also going to be obligated to rice kriya. The time I learn the brisa. Why is it, says the Brisa, that a person could have his young children, young sons and daughters pass away when they're little kids? Is so that he should weep and mourn over an upstanding person. It's like, what? So that he should cry when an upstanding person passes away? What are they taking collateral from him? What do you mean to say before he ever sinned that they already taking collateral? So that when the person passes away, he'll be able to weep with that. That's why he's losing his children. El Rada says, no. Because he didn't cry and mourn over an upstanding person that passed away, so because of that, his children pass away when they're young too. As the Gemara says, whoever cries over an upstanding person who passed away, they are forgiving for him for all his sins, because the honor he's given to that upstanding person. One thing is, you see, you're supposed to tear your garment when the Adam Kasher passed away. So even our Mishnah is talking that he's not a Chacham and he's not one of the relatives, but still, just in that way, it should go ahead and be an obligation to tear because of Adam Kasher. It's not necessary. Love Adam Kasher. We're talking about where he's not an upstanding person. But then the Gemara still asks, but if the person's there at when the soul is leaving, when the person's passing away, when he's expiring, you're already obligated to tear kriya. The time like in the Bryce, he says, if someone's standing on the dead person when his soul is leaving him, he has to tear his garment, as Taisus brings. It sounds like from the Gemara that even if he's not an Adam Kosher, if you're there when the person's passing away, there's an obligation of tearing Kriya. As the Bryce says, what could this be compared to? Let's say to a Torah scroll that gets burnt. Meaning, if someone sees a Torah scroll that's burning, as the Gemara says in Moed Katan Chavav Mad Aleph, where the Megillah that the Hayakim burnt, as it says, they weren't afraid, they didn't tear their garments, that there's an obligation to tear your garment. So too, when a soul of a Jewish person is taken away, it's the same thing. Because you don't have an empty Jewish person that doesn't have some Torah mitzvahs. It's like a Torah that's being burned. If you're there when it's happening, you have an obligation to tear your garment. So that itself should make you obligated to tear, even though he's not one of your 7 relatives, even if he's not a sage, even if he's not Adam Kasha. So the Gemara later says, no, it's not. Our mission is talking about you're not there when the soul is leaving. Okay, so the Gemara says, Tenach Meisa, I understand you resolved the contradiction regarding the contradiction of his dead. On the one hand, when you tear on the dead person, our Mishnah says you potter. The Bryce says you can be chayiv. So very simply, the Bryce says you chayiv is because it's talking about one of the 7 relatives, where that's mesakin, because you have to do kriya. So you do it on Shabbos, it's going to be a constructive act which you're chayiv for. Our Mishnah is talking about when you don't have an obligation of tearing your garment, and therefore it's going to be mekalka, you're going to be potter. But al chamasa kasha, the Bryce contradicts on a different point too, regarding when you tear out of anger. Is that potter or is that chayiv? So the Gemara chamasa namalei kasha. So the Gemara, no, for anger it's also not a difficulty. Because Har Yehuda, Har B'Shimon. One of them is Rabbi Yehuda, one of them is Shimon, as the Gemara explains. Har Yehuda, the Bryce that says that Yigmi Chayiv is going to be Yehuda, Dama that he says, Malach Hashem Tzrich L'Guf, when you're doing an action that you don't need for the action itself. Chayiv ala Yigmi Chayiv. So when you're tearing the garment, you're so upset, you take that and you just tear it and you smash it. Do you need to tear the garment? No, you don't need the Kriya. You're just trying to let out your anger, you're just venting. So he holds it doesn't make a difference. You tore the garment, you're going to be chayiv. But our Mishnah, Hari B'Shimon, is going like B'Shimon that says you're going to be potter, because the Malach Hashem Tzrich L'Guf, he says if you're doing an action that you don't really need for that itself, so patala, you're going to be exempt on that. That resolves the contradiction regarding the anger. Now Rashi just points out, which Taisus disagrees, that actually we could have said the same thing then regarding the dead person too. When you're tearing for the dead person, you're tearing, but it's a Malach Hashem Tzrich L'Gufa. So why didn't we say that resolution too? And that says Rashi, in the beginning we wanted to say that the mission of the Bryce is like the same Tana. The only Tana we could have said that like was like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that Malach Hashem Tzrich L'Gufa, that you are going to be chayiv. So then we had to explain why it's not even going to be a constructive act at all. But now that we're up against the wall with Chamasite, so now the Gemara says you're right, it's just a Malchagis Tanah between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. But the Gemara still doesn't like this answer. When do you hear Rabbi Yehuda who holds that a Malach Hashem Tzrich L'Guf chayiv is b'masakin, when you're rectifying something? B'makalkal mishamalei, did we ever hear that he says it by destructive act? He's doing a destructive act over here when he's tearing out of anger. How could you say that the Bryce that holds you chayiv when you're tearing out of anger is going to be chayiv? That's makalkal. Says the Gemara above, and he says no, hainam misakinu. Some types of behavioral psychologists might like this answer the Gemara is giving. It's considered fixing. Because he's satisfying his inclination, his yitzhara, where he calms down his anger. Where there are certain types of therapies that they take you to a room, which you could smash everything that you want to, and there are some that hold that is therapeutic, some hold that it's not, because it's just reinforcing that need. But that's what it is. The Gemara is saying it's therapeutic. It's misakim because you just smashed that. I feel good now. Yeah. So it's misakim because it's letting out that anger. Says Gemara, okay, I got me mishari. Is that even permitted? Which actually some girsais have that we find by the Rabbeinu Chananel that it's asking, no, would you be chayiv? Essentially, the Gemara is asking on that, saying, is that really misakin? Is that really therapeutic? Is that really healthy to let out your anger and say that's considered fixing? It's constructive. But Betanya, when the Bryce says, he says, Misham Chilfa Ba'Igr, he says, Sham Misham Rebbe Menuri, he says, I'm a kirei because the Bechamas. If someone tears his garments out of anger, or if I'm a Shabbos Daf Bechamas, he smashes his vessels in his fury. If I'm a Fazim Bechamas, or out of anger, he says, yeah, take the money, he throws it, and he says, get out of my face, just take it. In your eyes, you should be like someone who committed idolatry. Why? There's one of the critical Gemaras in Shas about character development. Because this is the craft, this is the work of the Yetzer Hara. What does this mean? Today tells you do like this. And tomorrow tells you do this, which is essentially you have no control. He starts you off out of control. Where does he get you? He gets you in anger. The moment you become engaged in anger, the Yetzer Hara says, you're mine. I got you. Until he says, go ahead and do Avodah Zarah. The person goes and does Avodah Zarah. Now that's actually a simple understanding. Rav Volbe says something even more scary about what this actually happens with anger. But before we say, which is based on the next part, the Gemara says, obviously it's not masakin. Because what are you doing? If anything, you're enslaving yourself to Yetzer Hara. You're actually making yourself more out of control when you get angry. Till you'll do even Avodah Zarah. And therefore that's the Gemara's question. How can you say that's masakin? Because that's what he's going to hold, even though it's Malach Hashem Zurah B'Gin Mechayev, it's not masakin. It's not making you healthier. If anything, it's making you more unhealthy to your Yetzer Hara. First, Amar Bavin, he says, micro, he says, what's the pasuk that shows this idea? It's a pasuk in Tehillim we say every Wednesday, shiur shel yom, which is today. Lo yeh b'cha, it should not be in you. In you sounds like inside of you. El zar, a foreign god. And you should not go ahead and bow down to an alien god. Now, what that sounds like is that if it's going to be inside of you, this Yetzer Hara, you're going to bow down at the end to a foreign god. As the Gemara explains, it doesn't make sense. How do you read the pasuk? What's a foreign god in a person's body? A foreign god in a person's body? Yes. As the Gemara Yetzer Hara. That's the evil inclination. So Rav Volbe says something so fascinating. It's in my self project in the clips. What does it mean, a foreign god in your body? What does it mean, El Zar? Zar means foreign. You can be disconnected from yourself. Zar means foreign. You don't love yourself. You don't know yourself. You're foreign to yourself. In your body, there's a foreign god. You're not connected to yourself. And you know what the first step is? Anger. You know what happens with anger? You get disconnected from your body. Your cerebral contact is disconnected. Your oxygen's not going to your brain. You're totally not acting in yourself. You're disconnected from yourself. Guess what ends up having you commit all the sins in the world? When you're not connected. When you're connected, you're going to do everything that's healthy to be yourself. He gets you, the first step is with anger, totally disconnected. So essentially the Gemara's question is, it's not misakin, it's makalkal. Says Gemara, no, we're not talking about a guy who's out of control anger. We're talking about the ka'avin lemirma imsa in shebesi. He's doing this to instill fear on his household members. So he's not out of control. He's actually in control. It's a controlled anger. So therefore, that's masakin, as the Gemara explains. Ki hadar Rabbi Yehuda, shalif mitzuv yasa. He would pull off the border of the garment out of anger to show them he's angry. Oh, Tati's getting angry. Whoa. Okay. Right? He's really in control. I used to teach many years, and I was not good at discipline. What I used to do is I would give the kid like whatever, and I start laughing right after it, right? But you want to, because how can you can't control kids. That was a fear I had when I got married. I was like, why should they listen to me? I can't. You show them. Tati means business, but Tati's not out of control. You get out of control because then you lost it. They won. No, you're not out of control. Just tearing off the board is like, he means business. We're going upstairs. Bedtime. Rav Achli Yaakov, he actually taver mani tzvi. He would break broken vessels. So he would make it look like as if smash the thing and it goes shattering. And it's like, that's already broken already. He's not out of control. He knows what he's calculated over here. So Rav Sheshes Rami Leila Amse, he would throw onto his maidservant Manini fish brine, aresha on their head. He means business over here. But again, he's not out of control. He knows what he's doing. Rav Abba Tavar Nachtama, he would tear off the lid of a pitcher. Again, these are all things that are constructive because although it's done caught out of anger, it's not uncontrolled anger. It's controlled, meditated, premeditated anger, and therefore it is masakin, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda, who holds malachas and zichud guf yechayv would be chayv for doing that type of tearing on Shabbos, but according to our Mishnah, it's going like Rabbi Shimon, who holds malachas and zichud guf, you're going to be potter, you can be potter.
Does malachas and zichud guf mean that the act that you did actually has to do something? This is like a supernatural metakin. It's not like, it doesn't have to do with the act, it has to do with him moving his arms aggressively. It doesn't have to do with the fact that
but you're creating something. Right, so it's actually Machlekes Rashi tells exactly what malachas and zichud guf is, but on the simple way is when you're doing an act, and that is included in the what you're trying to do, which here it's the smashing of the thing that's inducing the fear in the people in the family.
Is it the punch against the wall, or it's what you're saying is the window breaking?
Right, that he wants to instill the fear in the. I hear what you're saying. You're asking questions. Would that not show them that you're angry? I don't know if that dent in the wall is what gets people scared, or it's like the act. But in that act is included that you wanted to do this thing. So although the desired result is not your intention, but since that's included in what you're intending to do, so therefore that's going to be malach shel go with that according to Rabbi Yehuda and Michai. Now the Gemara says, just ending off the theme that we're talking about regarding crying on an upstanding person. So Rabbi Shimon ben Pazim, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Mishum HaKapar says, Kol HaMored Dema'is Al Adam Kasher. If someone has tears come down for an upstanding person, he sheds tears. Hakadosh Baruch Hu Sefer. Hakadosh Baruch Hu counts them. And he puts it into his storehouse. You know, like it says the pasuk in Tehillim, Neidi, my wandering, Sefarta Ata, you counted. Simadim Asi B'Noidecha, you placed my tears in your flask. Haloi B'Sefer Sefer, are they not counted for? So you see that there's a counting of the tears which are put in a flask. Amir Hudim Rabbi says related says called Masatl B'Speidah Shachach. Whoever is lazy regarding eulogy of a sage, roll the cover b'chayv is fit to be buried in his life, meaning alive. Shlomo says the pasuk in Yeshua. It says V'yikru Eisei, they buried Yeshua b'gvul Nachalase, in the boundary of his inheritance. B'timna Serach HaShebehar Ephraim, which was the mountain of Ephraim. Mitzvoim lahar Gosh, in the north of Har Gosh. What's Har Gosh? Malamit Shiragash Alein Har Lahargan. This comes to teach that the mountain trembled on them to kill them because they didn't eulogize him appropriately. Says Taisus, how do you see that? Because it doesn't say, like it says by Moshe and Aaron, for Yivko Eser Shleshim, that they cried over him 30 days. Obviously, they didn't cry over him appropriately as they did by Moshe and Aaron. Therefore, the mountain wanted to go ahead and kill them because, like we said, if you don't cry over them appropriately, you don't give appropriate eulogies, it's rola b'chai. Now, Amar B'chia Barabba, Amar B'yechon says, whoever is lazy in the eulogy of a sage, in the Marchiam, he does not have lengthy days. Mida connected mida. It's tit for tat. Why? He wasn't in mourning that the sage's life was cut short. So from heaven, they're also not going to be concerned for his life being cut short. Shlomo says the pasuk in Yeshaya, "B'sasa b'shalcha terivenu." In the precise measure, it's going to be sent for the contention, which means to say this person is mida keneged mida, that he's going to go ahead and also have a life cut short. But on this halacha, the Gemara says, "Eiser Reb Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yechon." Yes, the pasuk in Shoftim says, "V'yavdu ha'ames Hashem kol yemei Yeshua b'chol yemei zkenim." People served Hashem all the days of Yeshua and all the days of the elders. That they had lengthy days after Yeshua. We see that they weren't punished. Didn't you say that they didn't appropriately eulogize Yeshua, and therefore then they should go ahead and not have lengthy days? So Amalehi says Bavloi, Babylonian, because Reb Chia came down from Bavel. Yomim harichu. Yes, they had lengthy days, meaning they lived out their final days in good, which is considered what's called Arichas Yam. The Gemara in Yuma says, what's Ki Yarech Yamim, Ushnais Chaim Yosifu? What's lengthy days and years of life? What do you mean? Are there years of life and there are years that are not of life? So Rebbe Lazar says in Yuma that these are the years of a person which sometimes could be turned from bad to good. So there's lengthy days and there's lengthy years. So they had lengthy days, which means the final days that they lived out were good, but Shanim Lahiricha, they didn't live long years. They died young. So they were punished for not appropriately eulogizing Yeshua. But the Gemara says, wait a second, if that's what you're saying, that Harichu Yamim means only days, not years, if that's the case, the pasuk in the Devarim says, Laman Yirbu Yemechem B'mei B'nechem, that it should be prolonged your days and the days of your sons. What, Yamim L'Shanim? That's talking about you keep all these mitzvahs, you're going to have lengthy days and not lengthy years? So the Gemara Bracha Shani, a blessing, which is here saying for the good, that's different. That's going to be, even though it says Yirbu Yemechem, it's going to be also Aricha Shani. The Gemara concludes regarding the death of a person. It says, one of the brothers passed away, all the brothers should be afraid. They should be afraid of death. And a well-known phrase that's said over at many levayas, if one of the people of the group passed away, the whole group should be afraid. So the Gemara actually says, some say it means if the Gadol, if the greatest one of them passes away, then they should all be worried because since the attribute of justice is taking on the head of the house, the Reish Abayis, therefore then the rest should be afraid. Some say it's the Katan, if the youngest one of them passed away, which is because by curses, the Gemara elsewhere says Maschilim and Katan, you start from the smallest one. So some say it's from the oldest, some say from the youngest, from the greatest, from the smallest, but be that as it may, if Echem Nechabur Shemeis, then Yidigul Kol B'nei Chabur, they should all be afraid, and they should do Ma'asim Tovim Tshuva because of the fear of death coming upon them too. some of these we discussed in today's daf, in Shabbos Daf Kofhei, was we had a machlekes regarding the Mishnah of nutrikin, if you can be chayiv or not. Something where it just says, what's the source minat Torah of nutrikin? So we have a few different sources. We have Avram Avinu is called Av Hamoin Goyim, so that stands for different things, and Av and Bacher and all these different things. We had Anoichi, we had three different interpretations. Anoah, Nafshik, Sabas, Yahavis, different interpretation of what that's alluding to. We have the Malach with Bilam, Yarad, Yara, Rasa, has different things that it alludes to. Carmel is Carmele. Klal Nimretzes, that Nimretzes stands to what he cursed him about, that he's a Noyev and he's a Moyavi and different things. Manistadik, that the Shvatim said when they were caught with the cup. Nitztadik, we're saying no, that we are upstanding, we are tzaddikim, we are tayyim, all these different things. These are the allusions that we find of Nitrikin in the Torah. Then we had the final Mishnah of the Parak, which said if you write two letters, if it's in two alamis, which means that you wrote Aleph and then you had Yediyah and then you wrote Beis. So then we had a machlekes if that's going to be a chayiv or pater. And the machlekes the Gemara explained was, do you say if there's Yediyah for a chatzi shiur? Is that considered a Yediyah or not? That's going to be dependent if it's going to separate the two letters or not, if you could combine them to be chayiv, but the chatzi is not. And then we finished Parak HaBainam, and when we started Parak HaArg, the 13th Parak in Masechta Shabbos. We had a machlekes regarding the beginning, and also ala arg. The beginning is starting off. Is that 3 or is that 2 threads? Now, actually, the Gemara brought a different interpretation of this. That's actually 2. The Gemara says it's not a contradiction, because one is talking about that it's thick, one is talking about that it's thin, and we have 2 interpretations of that. If which one is the one that's thick or thin is the one that needs 3 or 2, and that would depend if it gets undone, which that's the thick ones, or the element would be about becoming aware, which that's thin, because 2 threads are not so significant. So that would be 2 different interpretations in the interpretation of 2 threads versus the Mishnah that said 3 threads. We said machlekes regarding ala orik. So they're already previously woven a whole bunch of threads. Now, if you add on, is that going to be 1 or 2? The Chacham always hold that's going to be 2. That's the opinion of the Chacham. Now we said if someone makes 2 bati nirin, which are the 2 heddle rings, and you pass the warp threads through, or then you can be chayiv if someone does stitching of 2 stitches, you tear with the intention of stitching 2 stitches. And why do we say this halachas? I already know it from Paraklagah. But because the Seifa, which is the next mission of Akarei B'Chamas, I wanted to tell you over there that halacha that you're going to be pater. And additionally, we said when are you ever going to tear with the intention of stitching? Just don't tear, don't stitch. There's no, if it's made like a pocket, if it's all clumpy, then you have to tear it, but your intention is to stitch it together. That's going to be the malacha of Kareya. Then we have the next Mishnah, which we said why we introduced Taifa and Kareya is Hakarei B'Chamas. If someone tears out of anger or on his dead person, or all types of destructive acts, he's going to be pater. Now, we explained that the case of B'Chamas is actually Machlekes Tanoim, because the Malacha Shin Tzich L'Gufa. How is the Malacha Shin Tzich L'Gufa? We said because it is Mesakin, because you're doing it Lemir Me'emsa Enche Basi. You're doing a constructed act, because you're coming down and you're showing them that you mean business, so it's considered Mesakin, but even if it's Mesakin, it's still Machlekes Tanoim. Our Mishnah holds, like Reb Shimon, that Malacha Shin Tzich L'Gufa you're pater, and the Brisa is going like Reb Yehuda, that says that you're chayiv. And therefore that's the machlekes between the Bryce and the Mishnah. Additionally, Meisai, we explained that it's talking about a regular dead person who he doesn't have a chiv of avelis, and he's not a sage, and he's not a kosher, and he's not the beitzis neshama, so therefore you have no obligation to do kriya, and therefore kriya is going to be a makalkal. But the Bryce is talking about that your chayiv is talking about somebody you have an obligation to doing kriya. Additionally, we said in the Mishnah that if you makalkal with the intention of being masakin, that shiur, the measurement is going to be like that of masakin, like we had regarding kareya and tefirah. Also, we spoke at the shiur of malab and whitening, disentangling, manapit, saveya dying, and taiba spinning. That's kamalei reichav asid kafel. So you take the sit, which is between the 2 fingers, and you do double that. That's that measurement. And oirig is 2 threads. That's even kamalei sit, even just 1 time of that distance. Then we spoke about if someone tears out of anger, it's like doing avodah zara. We said that's considered the el zar b'gufish al adam. A person's disconnected inside of himself. That's the yitzhara. We said if someone sheds tears on the adam kasha, Kadosh Baruch Hu counts them, puts them into his base kanazim. Someone's lazy regarding eulogizing a chacham, and he's fit to be buried in his lifetime. We spoke about there's a difference between arichas yama and shanim. Arichas yama is good days. Then there's shanim, which is living a long time. And that was what we spoke about by Yeshua. Although they had arichas yama, they didn't have arichas shanim because they were lazy regarding appropriate eulogizing Yeshua. And we said if one of the brothers or one of the Mechabura passed away, the whole Chabura should be worried. Again, some say that refers to the oldest or the greatest, and some say that's referring to the cotton, to the smallest. Thank you anytime for hosting us.